in our examination of this dogma today and in our communication with Protestants. Symbols and types do not make Catholic dogma. This is a dogma because it is a historical truth that has been taught from the very beginning of our faith. But indeed, there are still a few arguments put forth, such as the oft-used argument of Mary's temple visit for a purification ritual. It is said that if she was sinless, her sacrificial offering of the turtle doves would have not been needed. But this fallacious argument is easily diffused when we realize that Luke writes, at the end of 8 days, when he was circumcised, he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the time came for the purification, according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord. A pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Luke 2:21-24. Well, a simple examination of the text reveals that Mary, as Christ, was born under the law and thus submitted to the Mosaic law's rituals. Such a parallel can be found in the fact that Christ was also circumcised but clearly lacked any sin at all. Circumcision was a Mosaic practice that symbolized being made intrinsically clean. There are indeed other arguments that we hear brought forth, such as the texts in Romans that tell us of all having sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We also have certain passages that tell us that sin entered through a man and passed all men, which is indeed why all die. The argument is said that since all is mentioned, this must include Mary. But a clear examination yields proof to the contrary. A monumental Greek study on the word pas in the Bible and surrounding literature shows us a wide array of usage this term had. As is clear, this term also had a varying degree of uses in Paul's text. Specifically in Romans, the very epistle that Protestants use to conjure up arguments against Mary's sinlessness. Indeed, all having sinned is reference to personal sin and not to original, but the argument is still easily refuted when we read in Romans 11:26, and thus all Israel would be saved. And then in Romans 8:22, for we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. Clearly, the usages of pas for all in these texts do not mean each and every single individual. We've got to be consistent with our usage of biblical terms and understand the clear context of the author. There are early fathers and early ancient prayers, documents, and feasts that all point to this being a historical truth of the Christian faith. Indeed, if there is a man-made tradition floating about, it is a tradition that Mary was a sinner. And that is it for my opening statement.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Albrecht. Tur8inFan, you now have 5 minutes to cross-examine Mr. Albrecht. You may begin when you're ready.
Thanks very much. Mr. Albrecht, thanks for your speech. I was wondering, you started your speech by referring to Tur8inFan being used to reference Mary, and you had seemed to suggest this was only in reference to her. In contrast, however, Ephesians 1:6 says, to the praise of the glory of his grace, wherein he hath made us accepted in the beloved. Would you agree that in Ephesians 1:6 that made us accepted is referring to someone more than just Mary?
What I'm willing to contend is that the form of the word karatao is quite different in Luke 1:28. But just to clear things up, I don't want any misconceptions. I was not implying or directly stating that Luke 1:28 is in reference to the Immaculate Conception. I did not hint that at all. The mere point of bringing up Luke 1:28 is to merely show that Mary was graced. She was called having been graced in the past. That was the only point that I was attempting to bring up.
So, with respect to my question, would you agree that this us refers to more than just to Mary in Ephesians 1:6?
I would agree it does, but my contention would be that Mary is graced in quite a different way, and as evidenced in other passages, we can find that as quite evident. But yes, if you're referring to Ephesians 1:6, referring to believers being graced, absolutely, there's no argument there at all.
And would you agree that it's the same Greek word, it's just a different conjugation of the word?
Absolutely, no argument there at all.
All right. And you had stated, I think the second thing you had said after that is that this is not a doctrine that's expressly taught in Scripture. Did I understand that correctly?
You understood that 100% correctly.
Then you turned to Ott's discussion of this, and you had indicated that it was important for us to recognize this was unmerited on Mary's part. Is that also correct? It's not merited?
Absolutely, that is also correct. When I speak of it being unmerited, I believe in order to clarify what I'm trying to say, I mean that there's nothing Mary could have done or nothing Mary did at all in order to earn any of the graces that God has bestowed upon her. Everything comes from God, basically. It all points to Christ.
But there was no merit on Mary's part that earned her this. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's nothing Mary could have done to merit this.
Is there some other way she can merit than by doing things?
In reference to the Immaculate Conception, there is no possible way that Mary could have done anything, because the Immaculate Conception is referring to before Mary was conceived. It's referring to, basically, the way I like to say it is when Mary came into existence, at the moment of Mary coming into existence. So it's logical that there's nothing at all Mary could have done to have.
But it could be foreseen merit. Is it? I'm trying to eliminate the possibility of any foreseen merit.
What do you mean by foreseen merit? I'm unsure what you mean, because I don't see how that logically fits in. Because
I wouldn't think so either. I'm just trying to eliminate it from the discussion. So if you don't see it, that's fine. I can move on.
I was just curious. So what do you mean by unseen merit? If you can clarify that, I could answer it in a more cogent manner.
Some people say that God sort of looks in the future, sees merit of things we're going to do, or some good characteristic of us in the future, and decides that on the basis of that, he's going to do something for us. Some people use that about election, for example.
Oh, right. Okay. No. I don't believe that it's necessary for this doctrine to be true at all.
Okay. And with respect, the first point that you actually had raised with respect to Ott was that he defined original sin as an absence of some particular grace. Is that correct?
Sanctifying grace. That is absolutely correct.
Okay. So did Adam and Eve have sanctifying grace, or did they have an absence of that grace?
I would say that Adam and Eve definitely did. I guess I would probably define it in a different manner, though.
Okay. Well, fair enough. What about the Eve-Mary parallel? You mentioned who the serpent was. The serpent was Satan, if I understood correctly. Who's the seed of the serpent?
It's Christ.
Excuse
me. The seed of the serpent. I thought you said. I thought you were referring to the seed of the woman. The seed of the serpent. No. What verse are you specifically referring to? I'll go ahead and I'll pull that up right now.
Well, there was the Genesis. Let's see. Verse.
Yeah, I thought you said seed of the woman. That's why I completely.
Yeah, no, seed of the serpent. So who's that? Genesis 3:15, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman. So he said that's the woman and thee, and then between thy seed and her seed. So who's the seed of the serpent?
The seed of the serpent, I've really never really given it much thought. I guess we could view it as being those that rebel against God, I suppose. I really have never really given it much thought. With the seed of the serpent could be really exegeted that term much.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't have any further questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, Tur8inFan, you now have your 11-minute negative constructive. You may begin when you're ready.
Thanks very much. Today we are talking about the so-called Immaculate Conception of Mary. This doctrine provides an interesting viewpoint on the trend that we may be seeing in the debates between Mr. Albrecht and me. Mr. Albrecht seemed to think initially that he could prove the veneration of Mary from Scriptures. But by the last debate we had on the perpetual virginity, Mr. Albrecht had shifted largely from the Scriptures to the Church Fathers. And now Mr. Albrecht is in a bit of a pickle. The Scriptures don't teach the Immaculate Conception, and the early Church doesn't seem to teach it either. In fact, as late as the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas denied the Immaculate Conception. While between then and the 19th century, which is when the doctrine was finally defined, there were folks who came to believe it. This is not something that is an especially ancient doctrine. It is not something the apostles taught or believed, and it's not something they handed down to us. By the time of Trent, the doctrine had made significant inroads. Thus, while talking about original sin, Trent explained, "This same Holy Synod doth nevertheless declare that it is not its intention to include in this degree, where original sin is treated of, the blessed and immaculate Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, but that the constitutions of Pope Sixtus IV, of happy memory, are to be observed under the pains contained in said constitutions, which it renews." Now, that's a reference back to Pope Sixtus IV, who had published an essay in 1470 to defend the doctrine, and instituted the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in 1477. So that brings us to the first question that we would like to think about today, which is, why is this doctrine there? Well, the Scriptures don't teach it. It's not something that's really necessary for the faith, even though the definition of it suggests that if you don't hold to this doctrine, you're making shipwreck of the faith. But why is it there? Well, number one, it exalts Mary. It makes her out to be greater than she